for school help. We're filled out.
Okay. Just do Friday.
And the focus of tonight's meeting is going to be Cheri talking with us, and we have some questions to ask of Cheri too about how we can be more effective in both of the different organizations for the visible community and Lon as well. What is the campaign, and what do you mean when you say economic human rights?
The Poor People's Economic Human Rights Campaign is a multiracial, intergenerational movement of low-income families, poor folks, homeless people, and it's across the entire country. We've figured out how to link together farmers with farm workers, people that live in rural areas with folks in urban areas. We have membership from some of the largest housing projects in the country, some of the largest trailer parks, you name it. And people have all come together wanting one thing, and that's basic economic human rights, as seen in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. And, you know, where some folks can, like, now have a right to sit at the lunch counter in our country, the thing that determines whether or not they can sit there is if they can afford to pay what's on the menu. I'm a formerly homeless mother and have been doing this work for like 25 years. And, you know, we don't just talk about if people need help with food, clothing, housing, shelter, all of these kinds of things, but we figure out how to meet those basic necessities. And because we think that the way to retain membership is if we can figure out how to keep our members alive in the process so that they can become active participants. So that's the short version of who we are.
What is a takeover house?
What we do is all across the country, particularly in the north, there's abandoned government-owned properties that are owned by Housing and Urban Development. And especially now with everybody being foreclosed upon across the entire country, they heat these homes in the wintertime and they remain vacant. And so what we do is we go to the house and God opens the door and we go inside. And when we can't get a woman into a battered woman's shelter, we help her stay alive by moving her into this abandoned heated home. Or when a family might freeze to death on the streets because we can't get them into shelter, or the family has to be separated because they only have a women's shelter and a men's shelter. It's already traumatic being homeless without your husband or your wife. We keep the family together and we move them into an abandoned government-owned property and we borrow it. And we take the family's money, whatever money that they have, and we set up an escrow account. And as soon as, you know, the officials come along, we tell them that the family will be more than happy to move out if they can tell us where they can go and find affordable housing. But until that happens, we're, you know, we uphold a higher law, and that's one of humanity. And, you know, we keep the family alive in that particular property until the time comes. Historical sites are always good. Empty historical sites. I've taken over some flour mills, some abandoned hotels, abandoned hospitals, abandoned churches. You know, the Archdiocese once in Philadelphia closed down 9 churches in the poorest areas. And then God spoke to us and told us that we needed to take them back for the people. And so we went and did it. Yeah.
They don't just come and arrest you up for trespassing?
Sometimes, but you know, over the years, once you have larger numbers of people and you have the credibility and you have the power and the strength because of the numbers of people, when we took over the St. Edward's Church, 7 priests came in and told us that we needed to leave for insurance reasons. We had about 100 families in there. And I asked the priest, I said, can I have 48 hours? Because we have 100 people. It's the dead of winter and we don't have any place to go. And the priest said, okay, Cheri, we're going to give you 48 hours. And then the priest came back, and when the priest came back in 48 hours, we filled the church with every Bible verse about the poor and every quote from the Pope about the role of all of us to each other and to, our faith and our belief. And so the priest came in and said, Cheri, I thought you were going to be a woman of your word and move these families out after 48 hours. And I told the priest that I had talked to God and God gave us permission to stay. And of course I did this with every news camera and every journalist in all of Philadelphia, and the families were able to live there for another 4 months until we were able to get them into other kind of housing. Anybody that we work with always ends up with a victory at the end and gets some form of housing. They don't necessarily hold on to it, but we do get them into some kind of decent, accessible, affordable housing. But the other thing I want to say too is that those priests, other than just worrying about the insurance, quite frankly, they had a responsibility to worry about where those 100 children should go as well. And so the offer wasn't, let me come take them to my house, or let me take them to a different church, because it was 7 priests. It wasn't that we were going, we identified a poor church, right? The Archdiocese didn't close down any of the churches in Center City, or it was in poor communities. And this actual church that we had taken over, the actual nuns and the actual priest actually came back and began to hold interfaith services on the Sundays that we were inside the church, because they went through a huge struggle with the Archdiocese, because they were furious that the Archdiocese was closing down the poorest churches that were providing the bulk of social services in the community.
Been looking at, with respect to the new grant, talking about and thinking about the root causes of the human rights issues that you work on, and issues like food stamps, and the question of how good a solution, quote unquote, is that for real change with respect to poverty. And I don't know what your comment would be about that.
I'm the last person, and people always try to trap me and have me say that I want bigger and better welfare checks or bigger and better food stamps. Nah. I want people to have a right to food, not food stamps. I want people to have a right to living wage jobs. I want people to have, decent, quality, accessible, affordable housing. I don't really fit that category that's like, of course I have to speak out when we don't have those things and they're trying to cut the only social welfare system that we have, because I don't think it's okay to pull the rug out until you have something put in place, like living wage jobs and food and those kinds of things.
What are some challenges and successes you've experienced working with people across racial lines? What advice can you give the visible community about working with immigrants and refugees and understanding their human rights are linked to our own?
Well, we pretty much have always stayed away from sensitivity sessions. We feel like those don't really work. The last thing we need is another workshop And what we need to do is we start to live by example. And so we bring people together around what they have in common in terms of their economic needs. And so we do food distribution, or people from many different cultural backgrounds will be working with each other to build an encampment, or going door to door in the neighborhood. And quite frankly, sometimes it's the very first time that they've ever been in the room with somebody of color or from a different culture. And it forces them to have a dialogue and begin to develop a relationship. And then we always proceed from our plan and our program. And we sit in the room and we say, here's the things that we want for ourselves and our community and our neighborhood. And now we're all going to come together. Now, we don't have to love each other or like each other at the end of the day, but the thing that unites us is that these are the things that we want. And there's strengths in numbers. And hopefully at the end of the day, we learn how to love each other and learn that the only thing that we have at the end of the day is each other. But in the meantime, we're going to keep our eyes focused on what it is that brings us together in that room.